the premise of the thing again and again, your character. And that's fascinating. You do it for 200 episodes, no? You just kept it.
Over 200, yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly I think Scully became, and, I don't think Chris didn't intend, Chris Carter, the executive producer and creator, didn't intend for her to become a sex symbol. I didn't intend for her to become a sex symbol. I wasn't aiming for that. But there was something about the dynamic between the two of them, the sexual tension between the two of them, that created this this frisson that just drew people in and turned this, sometimes down. I mean, I got pregnant a year after, so, very dowdy, sometimes quite chunky. And, the suits I was wearing were polyester pastels and puke colors and stuff like that. So through all of that, this fan base was starting who were both, men falling for Scully, women falling for Scully, people wanting the two of us to get together and to fall in love and to, all of that stuff started to happen around these two slightly, very, 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 like, uber intelligent characters who could answer any question that anybody asked on any planet in the world. And it all happened despite us. We were just young actors just showing up and doing ridiculous hours and trying to memorize our lines every single night without losing our minds, and people just completely grabbed onto it.
So what was the magnetic factor about the plot itself, about the aliens, about this? What was that part of the interest?
Yeah, I mean, definitely I think that was part of the interest. I mean, I think people became interested in it who didn't think or know they were interested up until that point, interested in life outside of Earth and science even. I think people were shocked by the character of Scully and seeing a woman represented in that way on television, and they were drawn to that new thing, and seeing themselves being represented, that it was, that it was okay, it was cool to suddenly be booky and smart, and that you could be sexy and smart at the same time, and all that kind of stuff. And Agent Mulder's one of the coolest characters that's ever existed on the page anyway. He's just, he's this outcast stuck in the basement, eating sunflower seeds that just is, and so women were attracted to him, men wanted to be him. It was just this weird, and I think on the one hand, the science and the stories were almost they were so tertiary that I think they were tuning in for this duo, and because it initially started on a Friday night, it was the beginning of appointment television. People would stay home at night with their family. People would stay in on a Friday night to watch the show, and which had never really happened. People would gather in groups to watch it together, and because of the thrill element, the scary element, the horror element, it's that appealed to people. There was and then the politics at the time, the fact that there was conspiracy theories and anti-government, and the audience was, it was just it was a perfect moment. 5 years later, with Bush, don't know whether it would have taken in the same way.
It took in a phenomenal way. I mean, I think it was 9 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's rather like an apprenticeship of some young boy in the Middle Ages going along to the theatre at the age of 12 or 13 and learning how to do that, and you're taking him for 10 years just to do it. And not saying that you needed 10 years to learn how to do it.
No,
from reflecting on what you've said about it, to come back and say, it was like an apprenticeship, and it was grueling.
It was apprentices in front of the whole world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
because I really, I mean, again, in the same way that I didn't know what, pilot season was, I didn't know about finding my light or hitting my mark or anything. I didn't know what they meant about us getting picked up. If the pilot was picked up, what does that mean? What do you mean picked up at 13? Well, if there's 13, but I just nothing. Everything was just kind of like, okay, just going along with the flow.
Yes. But the success was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And that brought its own pressures. One of the pressures was they wanted you to do more and more.
Yeah.
And can you give us some idea of what they demanded of you in terms of work?
Well, there were sometimes 24 episodes, hour-long episodes per season. And that, by anybody's standard, is a lot. We shot each episode in 8 days. That is a short amount of time to shoot something that's, to shoot 24 seasons in a year, let alone something as ambitious, as cinematographic, with as much CGI, etc., as what the show was. It was mostly, at least at the start, a two-hander, which meant that every conversation was had by us, which meant that every line was us. And so the hours were, I say, 5.5 days a week, because you start at 5 a.m. on a Monday, but by the time, with the 12-hour turnarounds, you end up going home at sunrise on Saturday morning. So by the time you actually then get home, go to bed, wake up again, you've lost half your weekend, and then you start again at 5 o'clock on Monday morning. So, but that's just how it was, and we didn't know any different. I certainly didn't know any different. I just did what I was told, and so we shot for 9 months of the year, and then sometimes did press during the hiatuses in Australia, Europe, etc. And then went back again for another 9 months of the next year, and then another 9 months of the next year, and then I had a baby.
And you only missed one show.
I missed one show. The good news is that the episode that they wrote me back in post-pregnancy, I got to be horizontal, so I was in a bed. I got to lie down 10 days after my C-section, which I would have been doing anyway, so no big deal.
Did you ever feel in those years that you'll be stuck with this character?
It never occurred to me. I don't think it occurred. I mean, I think for so long it was, it was a number one show for a while, and I was making the first check that I got was, my parents, it was like, I remember one day my dad had come home with a check because he got a check in order to make a down payment for a building that he was trying to make a business in. And that check was more money than my whole family, it was mom and dad and me at that point, it was more money than we'd ever seen. I think it was $25,000 on a check. And we sat around the kitchen table just with our mouths hanging open looking at this check of $25,000. My first opening paycheck was half of that. So to me, $12,000 per episode, unbelievable, I didn't pay attention at that time to the fact that was, a small portion of what my co-star was making. It wasn't important to me. That was a lot of money. And so I could only be grateful. I could only be pleased that I was working, grateful for the financial stability, amazing series to be a part of. Didn't really even think about the, and I don't know whether I went into it like this and I came out of the womb like this or whether the show made me this, but I'm a grafter. I show up, I do the work, I'm prepared, I lift the bags, I do the this, I do what's necessary. And so they said do it, and I did it.
I hope the pay between the two of you became rather more equalised as time went on.
It did. Yeah. Took a fight, but it did.
Yes. Can we talk about The Fall? This was written for you by Uncovered, who also Prime Suspect 2.
Well, it was written with me in mind.
With you in mind. Sorry.
It was written
with you in mind. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And he wrote the character Stella Gibson.
Yeah.
Who, I think it's fair to say, without being silly about this, hadn't been seen on television before. Maybe not in movies, but can you describe her in ways that made her appeal to you because of the difference? Not only with the characters you played, but with characters you watched and so on and so.
Well, I mean, in general, I'm not really a television watcher. So I wouldn't be able to compare Stella to what was turning out to be a kind of plethora of 40-something lead female characters that started to come to the forefront, whatever this was, 7 years ago. But what I did know is that of all of the scripts that I had looked at between deciding I would never do another series and deciding to do another series, I was so struck by Alan's writing and how spare it was, and yet how much I understood about who this woman was without getting anything specific necessarily from the page, but she was just imbued into every scene. And because I'd had so many conversations, both as an actor and as a producer, about how to do that as a writer. How does one actually make that happen? I was fascinated with the fact that here was an example of good writing. And part of what you got from the page without him telling us was this incredibly, I mean, it seems ridiculous, I mean, obviously enigmatic. You know, it's clear that Stella dresses carefully, you know, that she cares about how she dresses. Somehow, I can't remember how that comes through, you know, through the script, but it's not for anybody but herself, and somehow that comes through the script. You don't get a sense that she is showing off, that she's dressing to appeal to the men in a purely male field. She is completely self-contained. She has, you know, incredibly strong opinions about things, particularly where women and the protection of women and abuse against women is concerned, but how she relays that information to the people around her, whether it's out of explaining to their ignorance or out of making a point for her own edification or for her stance, is so smart and clear and pointed, and I just felt like I haven't seen this before. I haven't seen her before. I haven't seen a woman be so unapologetic about who she is. And that also goes for her and her relation to people that she finds attractive. As a professional woman who is in charge of other professionals at the top of her field, some of the choices that she ends up making belie her responsibility and her seeming level-headedness when she goes for, you know, a young police officer and just stops the police car, gets out of the car because she's seen an attractive man, and tells her what hotel she's staying at.
And the room number.
And the room number. And all of a sudden you get this sense of this person from that action that opens up this world of unknowables, and in a way that is never actually properly answered. We don't answer that. We don't know anything about her childhood. We don't know. There's so much that we don't know about her, and yet we can't help but be fascinated by everything that she does and how she handles every situation.
She also makes mistakes.
Yeah, and she also makes really bad decisions.
Yeah.
And she also lies. You know, it's extraordinary. You know, the fact that this woman finds it somewhere in herself to be able to purposefully tell a mistruth, given her status and given what she also believes about truth and integrity and morals and everything. She's very complex, and I hadn't seen such a complex woman character before, certainly not on television. And so, you know, when I met them, when I started to read it and was fascinated, when I then met with Alan and the producers, it felt like there was no question. I was going to, even though I'd sworn off television as I had before, there was no question that I would do it, because she felt like she needed to be out there.
Yeah. She needed to be out there. Why was that?
I think because of the fact that she is as complex as she is, and she is not perfect. Somehow she gave permission both to myself and to other women that it was okay to be, you know, in the same way that Scully, strong, intelligent, sexy, unapologetic, entirely who they are, you know, entirely, you know, she's a very strong character, and she doesn't, there's nothing that she does in her actions and her behavior that she apologizes for, and sometimes to her detriment. And yet there's something about her conviction and her complexity that somehow gave permission to be as complex, to be a complex woman.
You seem to be drawn, I mean, it's very evident, and I've been in many of the parts too, drawing a great deal out of a little. I mean, at the beginning of the conversation about this particular play, you said it was very spare, approvingly.
Yes.
So there's plenty of space for you.
Possibly, but spare. Here's what I meant by that, actually, is that very often American writers are urged by studios to put everything on the page. And sometimes as a reader of those scripts, you end up feeling like the audience is being treated as idiots, as if they can't figure things out for themselves. So if there's a look across the room, they have to explain what that look means in the directive, you know, because 10 years ago he blah, 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 you know. So I was so used to reading way too much information, or where the characters weren't coming through the text. They were coming through the descriptives in between the text. And to actually have a writer who was able to write dialogue based on the whole of the character and all of their attributes, and be able to imbue that into how they talk, which is different than how this character talks because of their personality. I mean, you'd think, you know, easy peasy, it's not. You think, duh, because isn't that what writers tend to do? But actually, the amount of scripts that I read where that's not the case. It's so when you come across something that you get all of that, you get all of that information, but through how they talk, the pauses, what they don't say as much as what they do say, what they choose not to, so many times you're like, just say something, explain yourself. And the fact that they don't is as much information about them as if they explained everything from the beginning. And so that's what I meant by Spare. It was just really refreshing to get all of that from the text without being treated like an idiot.
Yeah. It's impossible to listen to you talking like that without thinking of Beckett and Pinter, because Pinter's pauses were as famous as his lines, really.
Yeah.
And as significant.
Yeah. And Beckett, yes, absolutely.